Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is How Can One Adhere to Metaphysical Thinking and Still Be Practical by Manly P. Hall. An article taken from Horizon, the Magazine of Useful and Intelligent Living, Volume 18, Number 1, Summer 1958. In reply, a department of questions and answers. Question: how can one adhere to metaphysical thinking and still be practical? Answer: it would seem that we must first define the word metaphysical. As its structure suggests, it means of or pertaining to metaphysics. Classically speaking, metaphysics is that part of philosophy dealing with the science of being, the science of fundamental causes and the processes originating in principles beyond or superior to external phenomena. More simply, metaphysics is an idealistic part of philosophy, assuming the existence of a divine or rational being at the source of life, upon which all existence depends, and which governs with wisdom and love the world which it has fashioned. The acceptance of this basic concept causes the metaphysician to attempt to live according to this level of conviction. The goal of popular metaphysics is to make certain applications of metaphysical conviction available to average persons as a religious or philosophical code of conduct. The formal structure of metaphysics is divided into two parts: the nature of being and the nature of becoming. The first part deals with the universe as an archetype for conduct. The second part with the advancement of the human state into harmonious adjustment with the archetypal nature of good. Therefore, we can say that practical metaphysics consists of a series of disciplines or rules, imposed or self-imposed, by which the individual is induced to live in harmony with those universal laws by which he was created and is sustained. It is assumed that disciplines imply reformation of character, regeneration of attitudes, and a gradually increasing knowledge of all things necessary to be known in order that the human being can live well. Understanding arises from knowledge enriched by experience, deepened by thoughtfulness and reflection, and internally clarified by meditation. In the field of metaphysics, it is assumed that wisdom bestows realization of the inevitable fact of good. As man becomes able to estimate more accurately the total nature of himself and his proper place in a lawful and benevolent universe, he can no longer hold unreasonable attitudes or permit himself to indulge in such negative preoccupations as fear, doubt, self-pity, or jealousy. Metaphysical discipline must therefore be founded upon broad and deep convictions which are strong enough to rescue the processes of consciousness from those forms of despondency which dominate the unenlightened. To accomplish its full purpose, therefore, metaphysics cannot be divided from the larger structure of philosophy, for it must make use of all available philosophical instruments to sustain its own position. From what has been said, it is also evident that metaphysics is intimately associated with religion, inasmuch as it deals with primary religious questions, and inspires its followers to act in conformity with the highest religious standards. It is somewhat more severe and exacting than religion as popularly practiced, because it does not emphasize conformity with the creed or doctrine on the level of acceptance, but only on the level of rational understanding. For example, it is not satisfied that an individual should keep laws or practice virtues. He must understand the substance of laws and must continue to seek for fuller and deeper experiences relating to virtue. Popular metaphysics has generally drifted toward the completely religious field until it has taken on so much theological coloring that it has come to be regarded as a creed rather than a discipline. Considered as a formal branch of learning, metaphysics is a highly reasonable doctrine, and metaphysical thinking should therefore be intensely practical. Metaphysics is as much concerned with the discovery and application of facts as any of the exact sciences, and truth, which is the end of all seeking, cannot be impractical. We must assume, therefore, that fallacy lies in the frailty of man and his lack of understanding of basic principles. We're all inclined to grasp a fragment of a doctrine or a concept without consideration for its context. Some idea intrigues us and we accept it as dogma, never pausing to fit the part we admire into the total picture of universal procedure. Today there are many self-help movements emphasizing an optimistic attitude regardless of provocations to the contrary. Some of these movements are referred to as metaphysical, and to a degree this may be regarded as the proper classification. Metaphysics, in this case, is the broad assumption that spiritual values are more important than material values, and that man may call upon spiritual resources in the solving of material problems. If we wish to say that man possesses higher resources within his own nature, by which his mundane activities can be ordered and integrated, the statement is a summary of the highest spiritual and philosophical convictions of humanity. As we proceed, however, from generalities to particulars, certain inevitable difficulties arise. For example, the administration of personality problems involves not only high moral and ethical convictions, but a vast amount of practical insight, skill, and discrimination. If these are lacking, or are not sufficiently developed to sustain idealistic convictions, the end may well be conflict or disillusionment. Part of the trouble is traceable to over-optimism or emotional enthusiasm without adequate self-discipline. In fairness to all concerned, there can be no doubt that a constructive, positive frame of mind is a vast improvement over self-pity, anxiety, and despondency. Many persons have developed negative mental and emotional habits which incline them to indulge in gloomy recollections and destructive criticisms. For such as these, a sunny, radiant outlook will in many instances produce a marked and immediate effect. If unadjustment is due principally to unhealthful thinking, such thoughts may become a heavy burden upon the spirit and seriously complicate our associations with our relatives and friends. A degree of self-analysis becomes a kind of discipline, revealing to us our own mistakes and inspiring us to correct them. Many concepts have virtue if practiced moderately, but nature offers no attractive rewards for excess, even excessive optimism. An attitude can never substitute for an action, but there are times when it can impel to larger and more rewarding endeavor. We cannot escape the simple and honest fact that as we sow, so shall we reap. To compromise this concept is to endanger the whole ethical and moral fabric of society. It has never seemed to me that we have real and sufficient proof that the divine principle has decreed that we should all be radiantly happy, regardless of conduct. Spiritual and material security must be earned on their own proper levels. This is a world of cause and effect, and we must all face our just deserts with upright hearts and dedicated resolution. The over-intimate involvement of religion in the gratification of the physical ambitions of individuals has a tendency to lead in the general direction of a subtle kind of materialism. Man survives by struggle, and so do all the natural kingdoms around him. Adversity seems to provide the greatest possible incentive for achievement. There is no evidence that living things can successfully evade the challenge of growth or the more or less constant proddings of natural law. If God, in his infinite wisdom, had earnestly desired that all his creatures should exist eternally in a state of security and abundance, some part of the divine plan seems to have gone awry. It would certainly be within the prerogatives of the divine mind to decree, according to its own insight, the proper means for the accomplishment of those ends for which creation was fashioned. It would seem reasonable, therefore, that the problems here confronting us must be meaningful and necessary. It does not follow that we must accept with utter frustration the burdens which offend us. Everything in nature unfolds and grows. Solution would therefore be in the acceptance of growth and a conscientious effort to unfold latent potentials in accordance with the divine plan. Growth is total progress. The individual is happier because he is better, he is more secure because he is wiser, and he faces the future with a good hope because his faith is stronger than his fear. Such a total pattern comes from within the person. It is supported by all the resources of his complex nature. It is not an attitude, it is an attainment, and the strength which he has developed is applicable to a wide variety of circumstances. A substantial and lasting conviction must be built upon an adequate philosophy of life. Only the wise and the good truly understand the wisdom and goodness of the Creator. Depth of understanding brings with it a continuing internal adequacy. There is no longer any need for unreasonable optimism or debilitating pessimism. Each person realizes that it is his God-given privilege and his human right to work out his own salvation. Merely to think constructively as the result of some formula and at the same time attempt no basic reformation of character opens the sincere but short-sighted person to the accusation of inconsistency. First of all, he must explain to himself and others why he is unable to demonstrate the doctrine to which he is so enthusiastically addicted. Critical moments will arise in the lives of even the most advanced positive thinkers. For it is still true that man is born, passes through a variety of experiences, pleasant and unpleasant, and in the end departs from this mortal sphere. Constructive beliefs may help the individual to adjust to inevitable vicissitudes, but they do not and cannot alter the basic pattern. Persons of every level of mentation have broken homes, business worries, and ailments of the flesh. If these are associated with undemonstrable affirmations, no one is much the better. In some groups of mentalists, it is decidedly unfashionable to discuss, or even to mention, infirmities of any kind. Reverses of fortune are accepted as evidence that the constructive attitude has not been held with sufficient strength, or that the formula prescribed has not been duly followed. In sober truth, the individual's total resources have not been adequate, and actually it is unlikely that even the wisest of mortals are yet sufficiently perfect to escape from the consequences of cause and effect. It has come to my attention that there is a tendency to substitute mental affirmations for a working formula of personal growth. We may even go so far as to ignore many practical matters which should receive our careful thought and attention. We may become indifferent to warnings and danger signals which deserve attention. We may invest other persons with virtues which they do not possess. We may become too trusting or even gullible, fully convinced that because our own attitude is kindly, all will come out well. If, however, our kindliness is contrary to common sense and good judgment, we have no adequate defense against facts. It is true that when we trust someone, we directly challenge his best qualities. If he has attained a certain degree of internal understanding, he may feel that it is his moral duty to live up to the faith we have in him. More often, however, the over-trusting soul is simply exploited. This in itself is not the greatest ill, because if we believe in people and sincerely practice a deep conviction, we must accept gently and lovingly the good or ill which results. Practically, however, we have great difficulty in accepting exploitation with good grace. Seeing only good in small children, when actually they need correction, for example, has been notably unsuccessful. Refusing to admit symptoms of bodily illness until irreparable damage has been done is completely impractical. No one can deny that a strong faith has helped and even healed the sick, but the average person is not capable of so constant and devout a mental conviction. We should not expect God to help us unless we are willing to give of ourselves in terms of honest and enlightened endeavor. Basic temperament has a great deal to do with constructive thinking. If the person is naturally industrious, sincere, skillful, and willing to carry his own responsibilities, a positive outlook on life may assist him to integrate these resources and dedicate them to noble endeavor. Whatever he believes, he will always be a conscientious and purposeful being. The situation is quite different when optimistic attitudes are held almost hypnotically by an individual basically neurotic and frustrated. He will seek to escape from negativity with a minimum degree of effort and energy. Even if he is able to force himself to some degree of temporal success, real happiness and peace of mind will remain elusive. The moment we place prosperity above principles, we again endanger our moral fabric. It may well be true that a good life, well lived, is entitled to certain rewards. On the other hand, can we actually prove that this is not already an operating fact? There are rewards which cannot be estimated economically or socially, but which are still entirely satisfactory. After all, the kingdom of righteousness is not of this world. We may be correct in assuming that growth is always compensated, but we must also become wise in the ways of compensation. The mind is not the only part of man that requires conditioning. Mentalism, therefore, cannot be a complete philosophy of life. We may think beautiful thoughts and still be rather objectionable fellows. Artists have painted fine pictures and lived miserable lives. The total education of human character is possible only when the heart and mind impose their proper disciplines upon the hand. The natural source of true discipline is broad internal conviction involving religion, ethics, and utility. Such a belief must be strong enough to inspire good character, which in turn induces conduct. A program emphasizing the material advantages of positive thinking touches the average individual in one of his most vulnerable areas. Very few can resist the inducements of prosperity and popularity. Pythagoras said, "All men know what they want, but only the gods know what they need." We must never lose sight of the urgency of our divine needs, nor can we afford to assume that they are accomplished merely through the fulfillment of our desires. Let us move this thinking for a moment into a neutral field. There are, for example, two schools of thinking in modern medicine. The larger school is satisfied to treat various ailments and restore the immediate comfort of the sufferer. The other and smaller group realizes that there is no actual cure for sickness, except a broad and deep educational program which will teach all citizens to avoid the causes of sickness and to live in obedience to those laws which promote and sustain health. The same principle applies to metaphysics. Those who sincerely wish to be happy and to prosper in their various endeavors must plan their lives accordingly. In this world, man exercises a certain stewardship over his belongings. If he is faithful in small things, he earns the right to larger opportunity and, for that matter, to heavier responsibility. If metaphysics introduces to the uninformed person his true place in a world of work and growth, it performs a very useful function. But if it overemphasizes the popular notion that a person is entitled to anything he wants, the danger is obvious. We fully realize that it is extremely difficult to devise any pattern for human conduct that cannot be misunderstood or exploited. In many cases, movements depart entirely from the essential concepts of their founders, sometimes for better and sometimes for worse. Generally speaking, however, it appears to me that it is unfortunate to associate religion too closely with material prosperity. It is more likely to compromise religion than it is to elevate our standard of thinking. If we are to believe the words and teachings of our great religious founders, wealth is not a sign of virtue, nor for that matter is poverty. Right use of what we have, be it great or small, entitles us to the respect of our fellow men. We cannot ignore the requirements of the soul, any more than those of the body. The health of the soul depends upon virtue, love, and faith. Unless these are stronger than mental attitudes, we are apt to fall into a pattern which does not nourish our total need. There are treasures which are not of this world, and these must be assiduously accumulated by those earnestly desiring peace of mind and peace of soul. If positive thinking becomes only a technique, it is very much like technical skill in the fields of art and music. There are many wonderful technicians who will never be great artists because they lack the intangible quality of soul power. There are many rich and prosperous citizens who will never be happy for the same reason. Such persons have demonstrated abundance, but they are often obviously deficient in those gentler virtues which contribute to the lasting well-being of themselves and others. For example, they have found no internal incentive to use their possessions wisely or lovingly, nor do they support with the full strength of spirit that which is essentially good. I am in no way opposed to creative and constructive thought when it is supported by genuine insight and understanding. If it is isolated, however, from an adequate moral and ethical pattern, and if it does not improve social adjustment, little of permanent value has been accomplished. The hypochondriac who in past years pestered the family physician is now sitting on the doorstep of the mental therapist. This may offer a genuine opportunity to serve, but it also carries a clear and definite statement of responsibility. The doctor of 50 years ago met this emergency with a bread pill or an expensive capsule filled with bicarbonate of soda. The patient immediately got better and returned periodically for further assistance. The modern counterpart of this hypochondriac is ready to testify to the miraculous results of mental treatment. A few days later, however, he has another emergency and rouses his therapist in the middle of the night to treat anything from insomnia to a bad conscience. The last thing that this hypochondriac wants is the truth, and he would be mortally offended if told that he is in a condition of complete internal chaos. If metaphysics is to be useful in such cases, it must offer a complete program of mental, emotional, and physical rehabilitation. It is a science and a philosophy as well as an art and a religion. The only solution is a program of instruction which will introduce good habits and proper attitudes. Not so long ago, a friend of mine who was completely dedicated to the concept of mind over matter came to me with a serious dilemma. He had just learned that he was suffering from an incurable disease and was completely unable to think his way out of this calamity. Actually, he was more disturbed by the possibility that other members of the group to which he belonged might discover that he was not able to demonstrate healing for himself than he was over the seriousness of his own condition. His case was by no means unique, but it points up a valuable fact. He had made so many pretenses, had claimed so much, and had been so critical of others who did not share his convictions, that his mortification and embarrassment knew no bounds. Had he been more modest in his claims and more reasonable in his opinions, he would not have found himself in this unhappy predicament. Helping this man was simply a problem of getting his feet back on the earth where they belonged, and reminding him of the essential spiritual content of his own doctrine. Above and beyond man's plans and conspiracies, to paraphrase a Chinese adage, heaven bestows and heaven also takes back that which it has bestowed. It is God, not man, whose laws must be kept. It is spirit, not mind, that must be obeyed. We can help, but we cannot demand. We can serve, but we cannot require. Each human being has a peculiar destiny which he must work out with diligence. To deny the existence of laws beyond those of the human mind is to deny divine providence. If we are humble and do the best we can, inviting others to raise their standards of conduct and helping them to do so, we can be useful as teachers and friends. Yet no matter how much we know, we are never immune to the eternal workings of the universal will. What is ours must come to us. What we deserve, we must face. Sometimes we grow most when our burdens are heaviest. From our point of view, therefore, metaphysics, when properly understood, presents no problems more serious than those associated with any ethical philosophy or enlightened religion. It certainly does require decisions and a mature weighing of values. All idealists are confronted with a world of material pressures. The more strength we have in ourselves, the nobler our decisions will become. By living according to the best we know, we shall increase in knowledge and understanding, thus becoming better equipped to meet the situations that arise. Thank you for watching. And please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.